Hello, good evening, and welcome to Mindful Life 288. I am your host, Nathan Springer. Well, I am your co-host, Nathan Springer. This is your host, Leora Springer. Say hello. Tell the people good night. Nice, good night. And yeah, the earrings cute. The earrings cute. If you watch, she wears two different sides of earrings because the hoop on the left side, she seems possibly a left-hander, and the hoop on the left side, she amuses herself by taking it out constantly. So the left side gets a stud, the right side keeps the hoop. Solve that issue, instead of just losing that hoop constantly. Yeah, but we're talking news, and in the news today, this weekend was an attack on Israel by Hamas, and there's a lot of conversation going on around this. Now, some people are talking about the reality where this may be linked to the present conflict in Ukraine, because the attackers in this attack, bear in mind, they attacked random innocent citizens. That's why the kind of conversation about this is decolonization and they're having revenge on the evil apartheid Israeli regime. I don't buy that, because it's not like they went there and attacked Prime Minister Netanyahu. They murdered random people, so I'm not buying that. But in the attack, what was something that was noted in a lot of those attacks was that the weapon that they used were American-made weapons. Usually, for those of us who are familiar with Middle Eastern conflict, or you played enough of those games where you're fighting people in the Middle East in a lot of those war games, the weapon generally they show you with people in the Middle East would be AK-47s. But they weren't AK-47s this time. They were M4s. They were American-made. They were American-made weapons. And the problem being, some people are presuming that some of those weapons may have been some of the surplus that was sent to Ukraine, was sold on the black market back to Hamas. Some people are also presuming that some of the extra that was left back in Afghanistan, when the United States pulled out of Afghanistan, that was some that was left there. Trini Utep says, oh please, Hamas wants to eradicate Jewish people, that's their ideology. And I 100% agree. Like when people make it seem like it's both flip sides of the same coin, I don't totally agree. I know there's a lot of nuance in the situation, but the reality is Hamas, their charter, their constitution, as it were, has that they don't believe Israel should exist as a country. So as some people say, if Hamas were to put down their guns today, you would end up with basically peace in the Middle East. If the Israelis were to put down their guns today, then you'd end up with no more nation of Israel. And there are many people who are very okay with that. They want that to be the case, no more nation of Israel. And I know the historical arguments that Israel didn't exist until the 1940s when the United Nations created them with the British and that. But many people who say that talk about Palestine, not understanding that Palestine was a Roman name in the first place. Palestine was a Roman district created by the Romans. It's not like it was really a country. There's a lot of complicated history there. And the reality with Hamas, similar to Al-Qaeda, similar to ISIS, similar to a lot of those other terrorist organizations, the reality with Hamas, when you look at the history, Hamas was partially created, as it seems like nearly all terrorist organizations were, by the United States and to some extent Israel also. Because in the beginning, Israel and the United States funded some of the Hamas-linked mosques and the Hamas-linked organizations and activities. They funded it with the purpose of causing some instability in Palestine, where Hamas would be their counterbalance against Mr. Yasser Arafat and his Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, I believe they were. And so there was funding from the Israelis and the US creating Hamas in the beginning, and as with nearly all of those situations, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the story repeats over and over and over. They lose control of what they thought they had control over, and you end up with situations like this, as we see right now, with Hamas attacking Israel and Israel returning by demolishing Hamas. And that's part of the reason also why when I hear people agreeing with this, like this is some great revolution. Well done on Hamas part. They're taking it to their colonizers, and I'm like, what do you think what do you hope to accomplish by this? You understand that already more Palestinians have lost their lives than the Israelis who died. It's already imbalanced on the Palestinian side. So I don't understand what the end goal of such a thing would be. What would be your hope in this? What would you be trying to accomplish by just randomly aggravating the Israelis, and also in the process attacking other foreign nationals? They have kidnapped, allegedly some of the people they kidnapped were foreign nationals from other countries. I believe there were already 2 or 3 US citizens reported dead, and some US citizens may be kidnapped. How do you think such a thing ends? How do you think such a thing ends? Kidnapped Americans, kidnapped Germans. What happens then? I don't understand, like, what's the end game here. And the only thing I could think about is that these actions, the end game for these actions, have nothing to do with something positive for Palestine. It's part of a larger move where you see Iran involved and Hezbollah and the wider Middle East. And the unfortunate thing is the Palestinians are fodder. They are the pawns in this. They are the ones who are actually paying in blood for all of the political games and machinations going on around the Middle East. The Palestinians are the ones that actually pay the cost for it. Isn't that unfortunate? And that's why I say people need to understand, as we talk about international issues, as we talk about it in Trinidad and Tobago, the government of a country, as I said as we were beginning, the government of a country is not the same thing as that country. The Chinese Communist Party is not China. Kim Jong-un is not North Korea. Maduro is not Venezuela. And all things done by the Israeli government isn't a sign and a reflection of all Israelis. And likewise for Hamas. And the unfortunate thing in that is that when attacks happen and revenge happen and reprisals happen, now that Israel is taking revenge on Hamas, there are 2.2 million people living in Gaza, and half of them are children. When they are taking revenge on Hamas, the reality is Hamas doesn't have a uniform. By and large, Hamas occupies many residential buildings, and while Israel tells the local Palestinians to leave, the Hamas governing body says, no, don't leave, they're fear-mongering, stay right here. So as Israel bombs in retaliation, obviously lots of Palestinians are going to die. And when Hamas inevitably retaliates again for this, innocent Israelis are going to die. The actions of governing groups are being paid for in blood by innocent people. Such is life. Endgame is one religion must be the true religion. Arafat refused to negotiate, so peace is never Hamas' end goal. Well, you see, it's difficult to have peace. I saw on X today, all about the internet, people sharing the images of the changes in the territory between Israel and Palestine over time from 1947 till now, and you see the area occupied by Palestine shrinks and the area occupied by Israel increases. But that tells half the story. Nearly every time Israel increased land area, it was because they were attacked. Someone of their neighbors attacked them, they rebuffed the attack, they captured more land. Like, I wonder sometimes, and I understand that there's a religious angle to this, and the three major Abrahamic religions all kind of have a horse in the race, it may seem, in this conflict. But I wonder sometimes, like the people who are fully against Israel in this conflict and hashtag free Palestine and all of that too. What do they want Israel to do? Like, I see some people say Israel needs to end its military occupation, leave the occupied Palestinian lands, and okay, if they leave, do you think that Hamas, Hezbollah, those Palestinian extremist organizations, do you think they would stop attacking Israel? Like, what do you want them to do? Anyway, that's world news. That's not necessarily our news down here. To get specific to our news down here, I saw something interesting. Something that, I don't know how all the facts of it may be playing out, but I could wonder if I might be in agreement with some of this. Listen to this interesting bit of news. Pilots resigning as state moves to decertify union. Caribbean Airlines pilots are reportedly resigning in droves as the state-owned carrier has filed an industrial relations offense against the TNT Airline Pilots Association, which a source says will decertify the union if successful. If successful. The source said the pilots are frustrated over the lawsuit filed on August 20th, following a sick-out that left thousands of CAL passengers stranded from August 20th to August 21st. The industrial court granted the airline an injunction to force pilots to return to work. A source at the Pilots Association, who provided a list of names on the condition of anonymity, said 15 pilots had resigned in the last year and 25 others quit over the last 3 years due to the strained relationship between CAL's management and the union. The situation, the official said, will likely get worse. I find something interesting with this talk. The sources saying that the legal action that is being taken against the union, the pilots union, this legal action is causing pilots to resign. But if you listen to the evidence they gave of the pilots' resignations, they're talking about resignations over the last 3 years. The legal action started August 20th. So, if you're talking about pilots resigning in retaliation to the legal action, then you have to tell us how many pilots resigned since August. To talk about pilots resigning last 3 years in relation to the legal action against the union now doesn't seem very accurate, does it? They went on, CAL and the government need to cancel the industrial relations offense that they have against the pilots union. They need to cancel that, because how could you want to work with pilots if you're trying to decertify the union? That means the pilots will have no rights, no workers' rights as represented by a union for the first time in 60 years. And listen, I am kind of saying hallelujah. I'm sorry. I've said it before. I am not the biggest union fan, at least in modern day. I think many unions are obsolete. They have outlived their efficacy, and they are currently hammers searching for nails when a lot of the problems are now screws. Yes, co-host. Yes, actually host. I look at the unions in the States that were shutting down the United States recently, and you look at the history of some of these unions. The unions promise things larger than they are actually able to fulfill. They constantly do it. They promise pensions that they cannot pay for, and then the government, a state, has to come in and backfill for the pensions for the unions. These unions have incorrect views of how society runs because they are leftists, they are Marxists, they have Marxist theories of economics, and Marxist theories of economics are lies. They don't work. They believe like money grows on trees. Just pay people more money, just get more money from wherever you get it from and give people. It doesn't work like that. Many of these unions do not look at the bottom line. They aren't looking to balance books. They don't understand math, as Kevon says in the chat there. It could seem so, but I don't believe that they don't understand math, because the reason I say that is because most of these union leaders, if you're curious enough, you could go in and you find out most of them have businesses. They have private businesses, and they run their private businesses very capitalistic. They understand how to run their private businesses very well. They understand that they could only pay their workers X amount so that they can still receive some profit from the business. They understand that perfectly with their private business. So they're complaining, the pilots are complaining that it seems like the government and Caribbean Airlines are making a legal move that may end up decertifying the union. And here's the reasoning. When the union initiated what seemed like strike action by the pilots being an essential service, an essential occupation, they are legally precluded from protesting, from engaging in strike action. And if they do engage in strike action, there are consequences for it. And I remember saying this back when they did the strike action, when they did what seemed like strike action. I remember saying this: if there's no punishment for them doing it, then saying that they can't do it makes no sense. But apparently there is good punishment for them doing it. And the and the Caribbean Airlines is pursuing it. If they win, the union becomes decertified. They quash the union. And that's that. And the complaint that they give, the threat that they give, that the pilots are resigning, that's a significant threat. Isn't the case right now that Caribbean Airlines was attempting to get some of those pilots to go? Wasn't Caribbean Airlines trying to fire some of those pilots years now? So threatening them with pilots resigning is threatening them with a good time, as they say, is it not? That's what it seems like to me. Another set of the unions, though, speaking on the budget. NATOC, higher minimum wage will reduce crime. The National Trade Union Center does not believe the government adequately addressed crime in the national budget and has suggested that a larger increase in the minimum wage would better address the crime problem. NATOC General Secretary Michael Anisette and National Union of Government and Federated Workers President General James Lambert made the claim in a media conference at the NUGFW's Henry Street headquarters on Monday. And he said, referred to research done in Latin American and African nations, saying wealthy countries suffering from inequality tended to face crime problems. When you have a level of equality like in European countries, which is driven by proper wages, job security, income-led growth, and job-led growth, that is what stabilizes your economy. And you know what I find so strange about a lot of the people that say things like this? A lot of the people that say things like this, they're talking about equality like the European economies, and they compare it negatively to the African economies and Latin American economies. If you look at the African countries and Latin American countries, they constantly are within the grips of far left leadership. People who want the government in every square inch of the country. The government's fingers must get involved in every single jar inside the country. And those are the people you see in government in Africa and Latin America. And the unions that we have here are the people that encourage more of it. They want more government government involvement, but at the same time, they want to have some kind of, more equality inside the country. It's ridiculous, really and truly. If workers who produce the goods and services have no money to buy the same goods and services, you will have problems within your country. That has been demonstrated all over the world. And it said criticized the planned crime talks between the opposition and government, saying they can meet and talk from now until the cow comes down from the moon, but that will not solve crime in Titi. When you look at the areas affected by crime, look at the houses and the people, and you will see most of them live in dilapidated houses. That is a fundamental link between poverty and crime in any country. There's a fundamental link. Now, I have said this over and over and over again on this live. I do believe there's a fundamental link between crime and poverty, especially in the West. The fundamental link is the crime drives the poverty. The crime drives the poverty. Let me tell you why I believe that. You look into those. I live in Trinidad and Tobago. I don't know how many of you live here in Trinidad and Tobago and go about this country and have been doing it for, let's say, 30 years. If you have been doing it for 30 years, there are squatting communities in Trinidad and Tobago that started off with galvanized one-room shacks. And now the entire community is middle to upper middle class looking buildings. The reason is crime didn't infest those communities. The communities that still have the dilapidated houses that these unionists talk about are the communities ravaged by crime. Even in a community, you look down the dead end, you look down a specific dead end street, and you see galvanized walls and shacks and wood shacks and outhouses, etc., etc. And you ask someone in the community and they tell you, yeah, that street is where the block is. That's not just regular working people making a living, trying to live, and they still are living in squalor, and it's the squalor that dragged them out into the life of crime. No, it's the life of crime that dragged the community into squalor. You cannot open a parlor in your community. You see, one of the go-tos in Trinidad and Tobago is the stay-at-home mother open a parlor. If you get a little extra resources and you know you have a little discipline, you open a little parlor, you pop a grating in front of your kitchen, your kitchen door, and you sell out of your kitchen door and you have a parlor. You cannot do that in your community because it's crime infested. That's not poverty leading the crime, it's the crime leading the poverty. And the idea these unionists have that, the reason is the minimum wage. They spoke here about the nonsense they talk about called a living wage. They pointed out something that I regularly point out. And he said with the increased minimum wage, the average worker would take home just over $3,000 per month. He said that was insufficient to live on. And with rent costing as much as $2,000 per month, workers were being asked to live on $1,000 per month. First thing first, the minimum wage is the minimum wage. A person is not supposed to be raising and maintaining a family on minimum wage. The idea for minimum wage is that if someone can enter the job force at 16 years, they just want a foot in the door, a kind of apprenticeship style job, they're unskilled, they don't have much use in the job, you're going to pay them the ground level, which is minimum wage. At 16, they live at their parents' homes. They have no bills to pay. They have no rent to pay. That money is just to go cinema and save for the future, practice saving. It's not money to mind family. You don't expect the minimum wage to mind a family because you're not supposed to be minding a family at minimum wage. It's like the speed limit. This has always been something to me. The speed limit is, especially when the speed limit was the ridiculous 80 kilometers per hour. The speed limit is the top limit. It's the limit. It's not the recommended driving speed. It's the limit. So the speed limit should be a rate that you don't mind the fastest person on the highway moving at, which should leave room for some people to move at a slower rate also. It's the speed limit. Minimum wage isn't meant to maintain families. So the idea that you check up minimum wage to a monthly salary, and the monthly salary at minimum wage cannot even pay for rent, and cannot pay for electricity, and cannot pay for cable, it's not supposed to. All right? And the problem is, when you drag that minimum wage up artificially, attempting to force minimum wage to be able to cover the salary to keep a whole family, what happens to the 16-year-old that is looking for employment now? If I have a little business and I would have hired the 16-year-old at minimum wage with minimal skill to get some experience and pay him minimum wage. If you drag this minimum wage up to a livable wage, so now I have to pay this boy $10,000 like he has a family of 5 home. I am not going to hire the boy. It's not possible. You will just either put me out of business or you will put the boy out of a job. One out of the two. He said most of the people working in the private sector have been receiving more than the $17.50 or $20.50 minimum wage. Exactly. Minimum wage isn't what employers use anyway to determine what they pay people. People without the minimum wage, employers already pay people more than minimum wage. Why do you think they do that? You know, if employers are so evil that the government needs to force them to pay their workers more, why do you think the majority of employers pay their workers above minimum wage? Why do you think that is? Why? Supply and demand in the labor market. If there are less people that can do the job, I have a limited skill. I have a skill in demand. You need me to do the job, then you pay me more. Supply and demand. And you know, it makes no sense, no how to me, you know. It's like, all right, you think that businesses are so evil and wicked and greedy that they need the government to force them to pay the workers more money. Okay, well then your assumption is that these businesses are wicked, greedy and evil. Okay. If the government forces them to pay the workers more and they're wicked, greedy and evil, are they just going to stand that loss of increased wages? Or are they just going to raise the price of their goods and services to pass on the increased cost onto the consumer? If they are indeed so wicked, evil, and greedy, why would they not just pass on the cost? And yes, we're taking guests, BCE. Just in a moment. And what you'd notice, and this nearly always happens, because, all right, if you're saying that you have to raise the minimum wage, force it to raise so that this is the cost of living. You have to raise the minimum wage to meet the cost of living. But then, when you raise the minimum wage, the business people just increase the price of goods, so the cost of living increases. So as you raise minimum wage, the cost of living increases. So the distance between minimum wage and the cost of living constantly remains the same. So what eventually has to happen? If you're thinking about this, what has to happen? If you're trying to close this distance, what has to happen? You have to force the businesses to not be able to raise the prices. Price control. It's the only thing that makes logical sense, you know. For minimum wage to make sense increasing, you have to have price controls. Force the businesses to sell it at a certain price. The thing is, price control never works. Many people have tried it all over the world. It never works. If you tell me I have to sell my goods or services at a loss, I will just not make the good. That's all. If you tell me my mindful education services must cost $5 an hour, I will just not teach. And that's the problem almost all communist nations run into. If people don't have the monetary motivation, where if I do more, I get more, they generally don't do more. The 90-year mortgage, jeez. And, you know, it's funny to me. But government doesn't believe employers, landlords will pass on costs of minimum wage hike, property tax. Minister of Finance Colm Imbert, the day after reading the 2024 budget on Monday, said policies such as the increase in minimum wage and the property tax were implemented to address major issues. We are solving the problems, Imbert said, while fielding questions at the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association post-budget discussion at the Hyatt. If there are consequential effects, then we deal with that as we go along. Asked about the possibility that businesses could pass on the costs of increasing the minimum wage, Imbert said government looked more at the value it could bring to the people working for the minimum wage rather than the possible effects. Tell me, does that make sense? We don't look at the effects. We just look at the value we could bring. What? How does that make sense? You don't look at the effects, we just look at the value it could bring. That's the governance, the kind of leadership we have. But where's the middle ground though? The middle ground is productivity. Increasing productivity and removing the barriers to entry and increasing the ease of doing business. That's it. Increase our productivity, remove barriers to entry, increase ease of doing business. That's the three secrets to Trinidad. If you want to decrease that distance between the average salary and the cost of living, if you want to do that, that's the three secrets there. That's the three secrets there. Increase productivity and efficiency. The problem is the nature of our government. By getting government involvement in more areas, government involvement decreases productivity and efficiency. So we're actually going backward in that area. So increase productivity, we're going backwards in that area. Decrease barriers to entry. This specific government, as I lament nearly every time, the PNM government, when it comes to those next two, you see, barriers to entry and ease of doing business, the PNM government is probably the worst in those. They don't want you to enter, and they don't want to make it easy for you. At least that's the way it seems. They seem like they want you to stick with the status quo. Whoever is already inside milking from the treasury, they remain there, and you stay as just a regular consumer. You want a job in Trinidad, go and apply to the public service, get a public service work, and go be an inefficient worker out there and increase and exacerbate the problems. No. Don't try to enter the free market as an individual with capital. No. You don't enter that. No. You don't work on that. You don't buy and sell things. I would always remember that finance minister who criticized young people for importing goods and then selling it back locally, calling it, frowning on it as it's not entrepreneurial. While I am certain he has family members who do that precise business model. That's the majority of business people in Trinidad and Tobago. Import goods from foreign and sell it here locally. But he's saying, no, 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 no. You young people cannot do that. No, 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 no. You all need to go and make a factory. Go and invent a factory. Go and learn how to make dashing bush into high-tech equipment and material. That's what you all need to do. You all need to revolutionize manufacturing with local indigenous products. You all can't just buy and sell. No, 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 no. You all can't do things like that. Go get a government work and wait for minimum wage to go up. And beg your union to get more than 4% for you. You see, involvement in the free market doesn't need wage negotiations like that, really and truly. The free market kind of negotiates those things all on its own. These expired over 60, 65-year-old ministers collecting salary and pension. I don't think they can collect salary and pension. I'm not sure. But I don't think they can. If you adopt the position, this is Colin Booth, our Minister of Finance speaking, he says, if you adopt the position that an increase in minimum wage could lead to increased costs, then you would never raise it. And things like this is why I despise government in general. Government is a solution going in search of a problem. He says it there. He says it there. If you adopt the position that an increase in minimum wage could lead to increased costs, then you would never raise it. And why is that a problem? Like, someone explain to me. What is the end goal of increasing minimum wage every year? If every year when the Minister of Finance goes and does the budget, he gives minimum wage a hike by $2, what's going to happen in the next 10 years? Like, where does this end? If raising minimum wage could do it, raise minimum wage to $100 an hour and make everybody rich and done. If minimum wage cannot do it, then leave minimum wage alone. Stop trying to funge and get your fingers in on the economy just to try and buy a few votes from people who don't understand economics. Stop it and stop trying to fudge the economy and actually ruining it over time. They know people don't understand that. They know people don't look at it. They know when they tell people that we're raising the minimum wage, people think, hey, look, the poor people go in and get more money. They know that. And they use that. They use that. They know that if someone comes out attempting to explain the nuanced position that raising minimum wage doesn't really do anything, and what you want isn't the raising of minimum wage, what you want isn't the government to hire more people in the public service, what you want is for the government to make it easier to do business. But they know that explaining that view to the general population may be a bit difficult. Telling the general population, we coming out to give poor people more money. They know that could be understood much more easily. Hi, NCS. That's the nature of our economy. People playing with it and have no care for the repercussions, really and truly. The minimum wage is zero, as I always say. And do not listen to the unionists. Raising the minimum wage isn't going to solve crime. Giving people more money isn't going to solve crime. It's like the Peterkin siblings, those 4 siblings who were murdered. Do you think the murderers, the killers of those children, do you think they did it because their bellies were hungry? Do you think they did it because they couldn't pay rent that month? They did it to, they had to go and buy some ramen soup to just, the belly grumbling by. That's why they did it. It's the poverty. Is that why? Is it the poverty that led to the murder of 4 children? At least some charges have been laid. Charges laid in murders of Peterkin siblings. Acting Deputy of Commissioner of Police Intelligence and Investigation, Kurt Simon, yesterday praised God and the investigators whose work led to 2 men being arrested and charged for murders of 4 members of the Peterkin family at their home in Heights of Guanapo, Arima. I'm happy for that. I'm happy for that. I'm happy that at least it seems like you don't get away with murdering babies in the country. And they have the men's names here, the men who are accused of the murder. And the men are known to the police. They have been in prison before. They are not hungry. They are not collecting social assistance. They don't have food cards. The government goal is to eliminate middle class, either you poor or rich, no in between again. And you know something that eliminates the middle class very effectively? Crime. Crime eliminates the middle class very effectively. The middle class cannot survive crime. The middle class, especially in a country like Trinidad and Tobago, and that's why, like in the United States, they talk about their Second Amendment with so much adulation to some extent. But for the middle class, by and large, rampant crime decimates the middle class. A middle class family cannot survive multiple home invasions. One home invasion could rake out half of the net worth of a middle class family. Bear in mind, middle class families, working class to middle class families, they accumulate their wealth, their resources, they accumulate it in their homes. You go into a middle class home, you steal their car, you steal their television, you steal the cash they have on them, you steal their jewelry, you steal their appliances. In terms of their general worth, you may have gone with half of their general worth there. Middle class families cannot take that. The rich could. The rich could. And eventually the rich afford security too. So crime, yes, it could affect the rich, but really and truly the rich could survive through crime. And the poor have no choice. The poor would always be there. The Bible says the poor we would always have among us. The poor would always be there. They have no choice. They can't go anywhere. They're just there anyway. So the poor and the rich would always be there. But crime destroys the middle class. That suburban cul-de-sac, learn to ride your bike, laugh with the neighbors, have a backyard barbecue with 5 neighbors on your street. That kind of middle class utopian living requires low crime. Crime destroys that middle class living. The middle class depends on the police to stop it. And if the police aren't stopping it, and the irony of that is the people who believe that, poverty causes crime. It's the people who are poor, and you just give them more money, and that's how they get out of crime. And you end up in situations where you end up in countries like, sometimes countries like ours, where the government strips more money from the middle class. They take more property taxes. They take more all kind of taxes, really and truly. They force you to pay higher minimum wage. They force all these kinds of things on the middle class. Take that money, redistribute it to the poor people, saying that, by giving the poor people more money, it's going to reduce crime. And it does not reduce crime. And the crime now destroys the middle class that the government is already squeezing more. The solution is to stop the crime. And now reach on its licks as usual. No, Sylvan. No, I'm not talking about licks for the police. I was actually congratulating the police on the arrest of the suspects in the murder of the 4 siblings. I'm not talking about licks for the police. That's not what I'm referring to here at all. I'm talking about right now I'm licksing the unions who were saying that increasing the minimum wage is somehow going to stop crime. Like the accused who may have allegedly murdered those 4 siblings, what they needed was a higher paying job, and a higher paying job was going to make them not murder babies. It was hard work. Congratulations, I don't doubt it. Cheaper cost of living depends on how much you pay the poor class, though. No, not totally. I understand what you are saying, that if you have cheap labor, theoretically can reduce the cost of living, but that's not generally how it works. Cheap labor increases the profit for the wealthy, because cheap labor and underclass of labor comes in, undercuts the local labor from receiving higher wages. So now the middle class does not get money to spend, and the cheap labor is able to produce the good for cheaper. But now remember, the owner still controls the pricing. They could fix the price at whatever rate they want. And now you have a case where the middle class no longer exists, or it's difficult for them to exist because the jobs pay less. Yeah, they do propel the economy. And the idea that, it's poverty, it's just poverty doing this. Contractors want soldiers at construction sites, it's just the poverty. These guys are stealing from working men. These guys are stealing from hard-working construction workers because, they just need more bread. They're hungry, They want to go and buy $1 bread. There's no longer any dollar bread. They want to go and buy a little butter bread and a sausage and a buy. That's why they extorting all these construction workers who work in 36-degree heat when the day comes. That's why they're doing that, because they're hungry. A higher minimum wage is going to solve that. The president of the Joint Consultative Council for the Construction Industry, Fazir Khan, is urging National Security Minister Fitzgerald Hines to look into different methods of increasing his ministry's capacity to tackle crime, particularly at construction sites. Referring to the limited resources of the police to investigate and solve murders and ongoing extortion schemes on construction sites, Khan proposed the minister have TT Defense Force members posted at construction sites to deter criminals. A statement on Saturday from Khan said the council understands that the TTDF does not have the same powers of the police, but our country is in a dire crisis, requiring us to think creatively beyond our post-colonial systems to find and implement solutions to the pervasive criminality threatening potential anarchy, he said. There have been reports of an alleged gang leader based in East Trinidad allegedly trying to extort $30,000 a month from a local contractor to protect workers on the job site. $30,000 a month because he's hungry. He's hungry. If they pay gang leader $30 an hour, minimum wage. If they raise the minimum wage to $30 an hour, so the gang leader could go and work in KFC and make that $30 an hour. If they raise that minimum wage, he is no longer going to attempt to extort 30,000 from the contractors. It's poverty, you know. It's the poverty causing them to do that. The leader is also said to demand the contractor hire his gang members on the site. The police were alerted and officers now provide security for the work crew. So these gang members getting forced hired as workers on construction sites. They make more than $30 an hour, eh? So if you raise the minimum wage to $30 an hour, it's going to stop them from forcing contractors to hire gang members. Jacques Jones Carter says, I seeing people crying sufferance, but almost all bands are sold out for carnival, every party packed, people eating out, vacationing and living their best life. So where we suffering? Now, I don't believe there are people suffering in terms of can't eat. But I do believe there are some people who are finding it harder to balance the budget that they may have been able to balance previously. And what we have to bear in mind is there are multiple people in the world. The people who are filling out the parties and buying out the bands are not the same people who may be suffering necessarily. There could be a different group that aren't going to parties, aren't playing in carnival, and they're still finding grocery bills a little stringent. Trinidad is actually quite wealthy, to be honest, compared to the rest. I always say that, though. I always say that. I maintain that relatively, compared to global standards, Trinidad is a relatively wealthy place. We do not suffer by and large in this country, but that's not what the majority portraying. Though there's a subculture that makes money and violence a god, it is foreign to normal ethics required, correct? Some people live beyond their means. 100% correct. Many people do that. And sometimes when I see complaints like that, I think about things like that to say where, people are talking about the grocery bill too hard. I can't even make groceries. You can't make the amount of groceries you want to make, but I'm sure you could tally it down a bit and stay within budget. Many people have the idea that, and this is another kind of socialist concept, like, we deserve this, I am supposed to get this, I deserve XYZ. If I cannot afford to buy not even frosted, I want honey bunches of oats. Every 2 weeks I must get a nice big box of honey bunches of oats with 3 cartons of liquid milk. And if I am not able to purchase that along with everything else, then I'm suffering. I couldn't buy honey bunches of oats. I had to go down and buy the holidays plain cornflakes now. You don't need cornflakes. You don't even need milk. As a nation, do we understand supply and demand? I don't know if to say as a nation. I don't know about that, but many people seem like they don't. I'll put it that way. Many people seem like they don't. And again, to reinforce this poverty is the cause of this thing, raise minimum wage to kill crime. Former commissioner of police blames state contracts to gang leaders for extortions. The idea that some of these people have, that, if you give these gangsters more money, you draw them out of crime. That principle has been fueling crime in Trinidad and Tobago for decades. Former Commissioner of Police Dr. Dwayne Gibbs said the award of government contracts to gang leaders fueled the record numbers of extortions he observed during his tenure from July 2010 to 2012. He commented on the issue following a Guardian report on the multi-million-dollar business created by gang members who demand money by menace from small and medium enterprises across the country. And I mean, there's only two classes of people in Trinidad and Tobago. There's no middle class. Why is that? I don't agree with that. I can say the middle class could be getting it a little more difficult, but there is a middle class. Let me put it this way. The people on this live, if you can afford to pay your internet bill, you have a smartphone, you have electricity, you have the time and ability to sit at night listening to a guy talk about current events and random information for an hour. You are not a poor person. I'll have you know. In case you didn't know, if you are here right now, you are not a poor person. Just letting that be said. So while we talk about the difficulty of the middle class and etc., 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 you know, let's have some balance. Are you serious about that statement? What do you consider poor to mean, Deported Veterans Memorial? What do you think poor means? If you're poor and you're paying your internet bill and electricity, I don't know what you're calling poor. Like, well, I said if, and you see, if you're stealing your neighbor's internet and you borrow your cousin's phone and you sit down under a street light and you're taking me in on your cardboard box, I am sorry, I was not referring to you. You may indeed be in a bit of a destitute situation, but I'm presuming most of the people listening right now aren't sitting under streetlights taking this in. Also, we can't be poor and overweight. Well, sir. So you're going down a ticklish road there. In the west, you're going down a ticklish road. My internet bill ain't pay yet for the month. I slipping into the poor bracket. I sitting outside KFC getting free Wi-Fi just to listen to this. Alright. You own a vehicle, you have a job, you can afford rent, you can buy food, etc. Middle class. Running my bill cut and I not even. I know they were going to take you up on that one, so I knew they were going to take you up on that one. They're not having it. How you mean if I'm poor? But what is this? If I'm poor, I could be fat. And I understand the arguments for it. You know, the arguments for it is that you eat bad food when you're poor, and the bad food is what causes obesity sometimes. But that's still in the relativity and with the perspective of the modern West, because really and truly the fact remains, if you were poor as in deprived of the necessary goods to have a comfortable life, you wouldn't have been overweight. That's the fact. And I working CPEP, I living on CPEP money. You're working CPEP? Doesn't CPEP only work for the first piece of the day? Are you looking for another job in the afternoon period? I believe those CPEP and URP jobs are structured in such a way to allow you to look for other jobs at the same time. I'm 60 years old. If that's the case, you see, the reality in a country like Trinidad and Tobago is if you're 60 years old working CPEP paycheck to paycheck, there's very likely some either very calamitous story or some really bad decisions that went into that. Any jobs available? I need a job, a deported veteran who's trying to get by. Well, if they're a deported veteran, they may not have NIS. That's the problem. That is the problem. That's the thing. Like, you're not talking about the average Trini here. If you're saying you're deported, you're obviously saying that there's a lot to this story. This isn't like just Trinis being poor and destitute, because that's not the general case, as I said. Lowering minimum wage would increase jobs in theory, yes. And in theory, it might actually fuel the market to move some more, the economy to move some more. If you think about it like this, if we could decrease minimum wage, I've said this numerous times, BCE says it wouldn't. Yes, I think it will. Let me explain why. If we remove minimum wage, so, for example, if I'm teaching a class, mindful education, I'm teaching a class, I could hire a 16-year-old who completed CXC and has nothing to do with their time in the meantime. I could hire them and pay them $40 for the whole day. They are okay with the $40 for the whole day. It's not breaking a law, and they get to come and get some experience for the entire day. I would hire 16-year-old fresh out of CXC students for $40 a day. I would hire a few of them, more than one. So it might be anecdotal. That is negative economics. All right, BC, I know you were waiting a while. You could jump in there. So we'd talk about what you're talking about there. What's going on, man?
Hi, good night.
Good night.
Doing that will actually make things worse to lower the minimum wage, because the fact of the matter is that it's called minimum wage for a reason, and as I correctly said earlier on, it's not supposed to live and raise a family on a minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why it's negative economics is because in the first instance, the people who are accustomed being on minimum wage, you're taking them off of that to give it to another bracket of people. So when you take away that minimum wage from the people who are accustomed being on it, what are they now supposed to do? That is the first thing. The only thing that could substantiate, validate, and increase in minimum wage is increase in productivity in the market economy. For example, if you have like a beverage company, you have the market, you have the toilet paper industry, you have etc. The industries that produce consumables, right? We're not talking services at this point. And when these industries could produce at a good quality, competitive price, it affords people to be able to, one, be employed. And the ones who are employed and paid a salary, they now go out in different sectors in the economy and they spend their money. Mm-hmm. When they spend their money, they create an employment in other sectors of the economy. Mm-hmm. And the people who they create employment for, they in turn will also take their money and spend it in the sector that the first set of people was money. So what happens now is that there is a proper circulation of money within the economy due to productivity. The only thing that validates fiat currency is productivity.
Correct. I agree. However, I would add to that. I agree with that piece. The thing that validates fiat currency is productivity. And that's why fiat currency to an extent is slavery. Because fiat currency, they're creating value and forcing productivity to come in to fill in the value. And the creators of the value then could, as it were, attempt to force productivity out of people. That's why I consider fiat currency to be a kind of attempt at slavery. But that's another discussion. I think, though, that with minimum wage, what minimum wage does is it's like another layer of lies on top of the fiat currency. The fiat currency is a lie. It's making up value and throwing it out there. We say this is of this value and attempting to get productivity to fill in and backstop it at the end. What the minimum wage attempts to do is to force people to believe the lie too. So you create the lie of fiat currency. We say this is value, and also we say that the lowest level of work in a society is worth this amount. But that is not true. The actual minimum wage of the economy is zero. And there are jobs in the economy that people would be willing to pay lower than the minimum wage for. So your first point that if you drop the minimum wage, what's going to happen to the people who are currently on minimum wage? They're going to remain at that level very likely if their labor is worth that amount. Dropping the minimum wage, what it does is it creates a incentive now for the economy to pay people based on their actual value. Instead of attempting to keep funging those values by the minimum wage, now we could pay people based on the actual value. So, as something that I almost always point out in these lives, Kiss bread, the whole wheat loaf, nearly matches exactly with the minimum wage. When the minimum wage is $17.50, the bread is $17.50. When it was $15, the bread was $15. When it was $12.50, the bread was $12.50. When it was $9, the bread was $9. When it was $7.50, the bread was $7. Matches with that. So raising the minimum wage isn't giving anybody more value in their hand. It's giving them more paper to carry around, but it isn't giving them more value in their hand. And it's actually stripping away jobs from the bottom end of the economy. If you can remove that minimum wage, in theory, I don't know, we didn't remove it. In theory, you may be able to recreate some of those jobs that were lost at the minimum, at the lower end. We always complain in this country that we have lost the apprenticeship level of jobs. Why do you think we lost the apprenticeship level of jobs? The apprenticeship level of jobs were the jobs that allowed you to get that experience you needed before you start the job. You know, when every job wants you to have 5 years experience before you start? Well, the apprenticeship level jobs gave that. How did they give that? Well, you were able to work at the job and the owner didn't have to pay you maximum money. So he didn't have to be concerned about how good you were at the job because he didn't have to pay you maximum money. Now, we raised the minimum wage till we kill that section, and now to replace that section, we beg the government to create OJT, on the job training, so that the government would send you out to do the apprenticeship job, and now the government has to find money, again fake money, to pay you for something that you may not even be good at because of the minimum wage. If we remove that minimum wage, OJT problem solves itself. Do you understand what I mean there, BCE?
Yeah, but in reality, they cannot remove it. Minimum wage, capitalist.
I'm not hearing you. You get real quiet there.
You hear me now? Hello?
Yeah, I hear you now.
What I'm saying is that in reality, you cannot remove minimum wage because minimum wage is the invention of capitalism, where that system is designed to rob people of their labor activity. Because how you really put a monetary
Nah, you're getting real quiet there, bro. You're getting real quiet. I don't know what's going on.
Are you hearing me now?
Yeah, hearing you again.
Okay, yeah. So what I was saying is that minimum wage really can be removed because that is an invention of capitalists, right? It is designed to rob people of their labor. Right?
No, partner. Minimum wage is an invention of the unionists, and the unionists are an offshoot of communists. Almost all union parties formed out of Marxism. So no, minimum wage is not the free market capitalism. Free market capitalism cannot have the minimum wage.
No, free market and capitalism are two different things because capitalism is designed to make the rich richer.
No. You're coming to preach to me Das Kapital. You're preaching to me Marx's theory. You're coming from this with the assumption that Marx is correct. Capitalism is made to make the rich richer. No, capitalism is the Marxist word, the socialist word for the free market. That is what Marxists call the free market, capitalism. And the free market, capitalism, isn't that. Capitalism is supposed to work. The idea of capitalism is it's supposed to work on your capital, your money. The money you have, you can use as you see fit. The capital makes it go around. Personal, private ownership of the capital. The difference between that and what Daddy Marx wanted is that they believe the government could control all of the resources and distribute it fairly to everyone in the country. I'm sorry, I do not believe Dr. Rowley or Mrs. Prasad Bisesa has the ability to redistribute all of our resources fairly as they see fit. I prefer I control my capital.
No, that is what they would like you to believe is the definition of capitalism. But it's really Marxism. The fact of the matter is that the free market, the real arbiters in the free market are the consumers. Right? For example, let's just say we have 5 people here in the audience who doing the same business. What would decide which out of the 5 will be successful is depend on the consumers buying from which of the suppliers, the manufacturers, right? But in this society that we have, we suffer from a monopoly. We suffer from gatekeepers.
Correct.
We suffer from people using governmental influence to keep people out of the free market system.
Trini Hotep said the word for that. There is a word for that. That is called crony capitalism, because that is not a free market. That isn't where everyone gets the free.
Exactly. So this is what I'm saying. In theory and definition, they want to let you believe that capitalism is the definition that it just gave, that it is affiliated and tied to the free market system. But what I'm saying to you, it is more of the Marxist system in practice.
And here's what I'm saying, BC. I agree that the systems we get are not capitalist and they are closer to Marxist systems. I agree. But the reason they are isn't because of capitalism. The reason they are is because we have unions, because we have people who lean more leftward, constantly arguing to increase that government influence inside of the free market. We have people arguing for increasing in minimum wage. And increasing minimum wage is going to help the crony capitalists. Let me tell you, Walmart and PriceSmart and those big companies, they love increasing minimum wage. They don't mind. Walmart in nearly every single state in the United States, they push for increasing minimum wage, because if the minimum wage increases, they could balance that hit for the 6 months before the inflation tallies to match it. They could balance that hit, but they know that the small grocery cannot. So they're squeezing you out of business with that minimum wage. Crony capitalism, where the cronies, the friends, the oligarchs, the people who have connections in the government, they put their thumbs on the scale to prevent it being a free market. So in Trinidad and Tobago, you can't just go and bring in a car as you see fit. No, they tell you that a tax is going to be on your used car, while this person wouldn't have a tax on this car, and this person would have a tax on that car, and you can't do that. It's not actually free. They are cutting the grass for some people to get through faster. That's not capitalism. That's crony capitalism. Dalit, what's going on, bro? I see Mr. Jairam, and I don't think I've ever heard you here before.
I think you want to talk. Maybe not. I don't know.
Well, go ahead now, Hotep.
Yeah, and bro, this is kind of the problem, right? This is why I make distinctions on, because there's different forms of capitalism. There just is, right? And people don't quite understand that. So, okay, let me take America for instance, because right now some people arguing for a raise of $25 per hour in America minimum wage, right? Now, America is the freest market there is. Truth be told, there's the freest market, right? But even in America, it's not a free market, right? When you have the Federal Reserve ready to instigate with investment banks like BlackRock, right, and put a thumb on the economy, right, there's no free market, right? So crony capitalism is just the basic form of that. A bunch of people get together, they stick to one code of economics. They build wealth and they hoard the wealth for themselves and lock people out of actually building wealth in a market. So when you are locked out of wealth building, that has nothing to do with, well, socialism is better. No. It's all because people of a higher class are locking you out of the market. That's it. Because there's different forms of capitalism, free market, laissez-faire, capitalism. You are free to do whatever you want. Surely you're free to believe in whatever capitalism you want, but the point about it is that when your government gets involved in the economics of business, that's a problem. They tend to put thumbs on the scale. They tend to lock people out. So, of course, a middle-class family could no longer achieve a sort of wealth that they used to do. It's hard to do it anymore. You understand what I'm saying? People want to know why the middle class is eradicating and the deep state is happening. Well, hello, your unions, along with your government, is allowing that to happen.
And somebody asked, I think it was Sylvan asked if anybody ever removed minimum wage before, and BC was saying that they can't do that, and I don't think they will, because I think our governments are ratchet. Those ratchets that they tighten in one direction only, they spin in the next direction, you hear the and then they tighten only when you're going that direction. Our governments are ratchet, and they only ratchet up to increasing their power. Nearly no government decreases their power. No government passes a law that gives them more power, and then at some point in time they're like, shucks, we give ourselves too much power. I think we should cancel that law and decrease some of our power. Nearly no government does that. So we seem to be on a trajectory where governments get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Every year the budget for the government goes up a little bit. Every year what the government does, they do a little more, because somebody's going to ask them to do something more. And this might be controversial and dipping into a side that could lead a whole other conversation, but the increase of single women in many Western countries is going to magnify governments by 1,000-fold. told, because single women by themselves in society need a government. And they are going to demand it. So yeah, in the coming years, governments are going to skyrocket in size, and I don't believe they are going to decrease. I don't believe that the governments are going to dial back from minimum wage until nearly the only way these things happen is by crashing. Go look at Argentina. Go look at the history of Argentina's economy. They were leftist dream world, but they were spending money that they didn't have. The IMF demanded the money come back in. They said they can't pay it. The IMF came in, demanded something. They got another loan coming. They spent out the loan frivolously. They still couldn't pay it back. Argentina is just in a tipsy-topsy mess because of this kind of spending thing. It's a problem, just as you're saying, when you as a leftist kind of government say that, okay, we are now going to raise the pension to $3,500 to $4,000, okay, and now the spending isn't matching up. Are you going to drop the pension next year? Just as you were talking about the minimum wage. It's difficult to do those things. It's difficult to then go and tell people, well, we're going to take back $500 from you because we can't afford it. No, nearly no government is going to do that. They are just going to continue running a deficit budget until the whole country crashes. So I don't think they're going to dial back minimum wage. Why single women? Just to answer Sylvan quickly there, Sylvan asked why single women, because I think that's kind of obvious. For one, security. Women are also, not only women are more at risk when it comes to security generally because of lower strength, but women are also more concerned about it. Security is something of more primacy in women's mind. They think about that. I'm talking generalizations here. I hope you understand that. Women generally think about security more. That's why everywhere in the world, women vote for left-wing parties more than right-wing parties. Single women vote like 100% more for left-wing parties, because as a single woman in society, you need the collective for assistance. You need that collective around you for assistance. It could sound sexist if you wanted to sound sexist, but it's just reality. There have always been hermits and single men living all around the world, but you don't see female hermits. Yeah, who was going to talk there?
I was going to answer. Good night, everybody. So a few things on. I now so informed like you and Trini Hotep on this type of capitalism and that type of capitalism. I know all that into that. But from just like a layman's point of view on how the minimum wage works, if you drop the minimum wage to zero, no employer is going to offer a job at $0. They will offer it at what they think is an acceptable rate, and you, who probably fit the criteria, will go. And if you think that, look, I'm not being paid enough, you leave and you go and find somewhere that you will be paid better, or where the trade-off is there for you. So if they do drop it to zero, I mean, apart from helping the economy, because the minimum wage really affects everything, right? So the minimum wage went up. The supermarket, everything in supermarket has to go up, because now the supermarket who pays minimum wage have to pay every single employee there an increase, right? Even if they weren't paying the minimum wage, just the mere fact that minimum wage went up, they will have to now increase the salaries for their employees, right? Because not much people actually pay the minimum wage in the first place. So everything will not go up. And it's so sad, because everything will go up by at least $2, even though they really need like 5 cents on every item to really pay the difference. But they're going to raise everything about $2 and they're going to pocket the rest, right? So having this imaginary minimum wage that the government is in control of, that the unions argue for, I often hear the unions talk, and every time I hear the unions talk, I just get so upset. Because they speak I don't know if it's ignorance or if it's just like don't care. I want to say it's ignorance because I doubt that they do not care about their workers, but they act as if they don't know or they don't understand how it will play off in the end. So I will say it's ignorance because you can't just keep going hard on like raise, and none of these unions talk about how they would improve productivity of their workers. None of them. It's like, okay, cool, you want an increase now. But what do we get as the employer of these people? Nobody's coming to the table saying, look, we haven't been doing this. So what we want to do is give us the increase and we want to meet this goal, that goal. You know, them kind of thing, nothing is being done. You go negotiate and all you negotiate is dollars and cents. You don't negotiate anything better. Like let me say, paternity leave for men or things that may help not so much with the dollars and cents, but just the growth of everything else in terms of emotionally, mentally, or whatever else there is. So that's just my observation.
And you know,
so much.
The thing as you're talking about there with the grocery, where it doesn't matter if you pay somebody minimum wage, even if they got more than minimum wage, their salary would still increase. You see, we were dealing with the kiss loaf. If the kiss loaf is minimum wage, stop thinking of the dollar sign now. The kiss loaf is minimum wage. I am paid 2 kiss loaves per hour. It doesn't matter what the dollar number is. I am paid 2 kiss loaves per hour. In 1 hour, the amount of resources I acquire can allow me to get 2 kiss loaves. Now, wherever the minimum wage ends up, for me to continue getting the same salary, I would need to continue getting 2 kiss loaves worth of money. So my money, even though it was not minimum wage, would have to increase. Or if that does not happen, what actually happens is I get less money. The minimum wage went up, yeah, but now with the inflation, I am actually only getting 1.5 loaves of bread now, instead of the 2 loaves of bread per hour that I used to get. And that's the problem also with that. It will increase salaries all around. And if it does not increase salaries all around, what it's actually effectively doing is then decreasing that salary. And here's the reason I think unions are obsolete. I think the job unions did is carried out by the internet now. Supply and demand works in the labor market too. Workers are a resource that there is a supply of and a demand for. I work in the construction industry and I work in teaching also, but I also work in the construction industry. The bottom end of the construction industry, by and large, laborers, get nowhere close to minimum wage. And pretty much all laborers, basically, all around Trinidad, get around the same amount per day. There is no mortar and gravel mixing union association of Trinidad and Tobago. There is no mason workers union of Trinidad and Tobago that negotiates and sets that salary. How is it then that by and large, laborers get a certain amount, skilled laborers get a certain amount, junior tradesmen get a certain amount, skilled tradesmen get a certain amount, and senior tradesmen get a certain amount? Everywhere. Why? Because communication has changed. You see, in the days where unions became so important, it was because communication wasn't as prevalent. So I could have been working in this factory, and this factory owner paying me 1 cent, and he's paying all of us 1 cent. And we don't know that there are factories all around the country that would be willing to pay more, or there is a farm that will pay more, so we are going to not work in the factory. Or we are going to leave this factory, all of us would join together and form our own business and still make more than 1 cent. So then the owner of the factory, it is compelled upon him, not because of the kindness of his heart, but because of the supply and demand. He has a demand for workers. He needs workers. And because he has that demand, if these workers say they will not work for anything less than $10, then he has to pay $10 or close up his business. And then is the problem that we see with bringing in cheap labor. As someone was saying, cheap labor decrease the cost of living. No, what cheap labor does is it creates a glut in the supply of labor. It's like if we have we're talking bread. If there's bread and there's a certain demand for bread in Trinidad and there's a certain supply. If all of a sudden there are 5 different bakeries making bread for all of Trinidad, very likely that increase in supply is going to decrease the price. Because the demand would remain the same, you increase the supply. Now there are more goods chasing the same amount of customers. That's what happens with the labor market too. I didn't see the full end of it. So people were talking about whether bartering is capitalism. Here's what capitalism is, BC. I think you have the wrong understanding of capitalism. Capitalism isn't about profit. Capitalism is about private ownership of the means of production. That's it. Private ownership. If you have private ownership, it is capitalistic. And bartering requires private ownership. Capitalism is not all about profits. Capitalism is about ownership. The reason capitalism becomes about the profit is because if it is mine, then I get to keep the profit. The profit is my profit, because it's mine. If you actually go search the term capitalism, it has to do with who has the ownership. That's why socialism has to do with public ownership of the means of production, while it's juxtaposed or shown opposite to capitalism, which is private ownership of the means of production.
Then tell me something. What is the point? What is the purpose of ownership in capitalism? If you're saying capitalism is about ownership, I am saying capitalism, the beginning, the middle, and the end is about profits, right?
No, I think you see.
Right? No.
Go ahead.
When you say it's about ownership, it is ownership in the context of gaining strategic control over a market for the sole purpose of making more profits, right? Now, let's look at all the conglomerates around the world. The most recent ones that are very active now would be the pharmaceutical industry in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic, right? You have Johnson & Johnson, you have Merck, you have all these other pharmaceutical companies since the COVID-19 make hundreds of billions of dollars in profits. And only they are making that profit because they have, as you correctly say, ownership. What do they have ownership of? The pharmaceutical market. Right? You see, when you want to put lipstick on a pig, at the end of the day, it's still a pig.
Yeah, I just now, BC. As I said, I keep saying I think you're misunderstanding what we're talking about here. Private ownership allows for profiteering. You could use your private ownership to become a profit chaser, but capitalism doesn't require profit chasing. Capitalism allows for private ownership. That's what the intention is. And that's why people are so worried when many people come to talk about socialism and thing, and they're worried about capitalism because they look at the massive corporations, not understanding many of those corporations are only that large because they had government help. You're talking about the pandemic. The pandemic only worked that way for those corporations because they had government insistence and government coercion over the population. That's not private ownership. You see, it's not about private ownership there because it's about government coercion. Wait, government forcing you to purchase something. So another example of that for me is like car insurance. Car insurance where the government forces you to purchase car insurance. Then those insurance companies don't have to fight for your business as a private market enterprise. They know you are a cornered customer. Similar in Trinidad now with the banks, where to get things done properly, they're forcing you to have to open a bank account. And then they limit who could open a bank. So that's not private ownership and a free market. That's the government influence on that. What capitalism refers to, all it refers to is who owns the means of production. And yes, when there's private ownership of the means of production, the private owner can profiteer. That is true. But what is the alternative? The alternative is to have public ownership of the means of production. What does that mean? Well, that means instead of the one rich guy, you have the politicians and all of that bureaucracy owning everything. Imagine if everything ran like the licensing division. All companies ran like the licensing division. That's what public ownership of the means of production is. So, yes, private ownership allows profiteering. That's part of capitalism. But that is not what capitalism is.
The reason why private companies gained over the government influence over the population is because the private corporations lobbied the government in order to act in their best interest. So whenever that happens is that the government is no longer a government of the people, but by extension, agents of private corporations. So it goes back to the same thing that I've been saying. The minute government officials take private corporation money to do their bidding, it is because the private corporations are exerting influence on the society for them to make a profit through the government.
I agree.
And another example of this is in 2008 with the housing market crash in America, where the banks were making bogus mortgages and selling off derivatives to the public. And you didn't even have to have a bank account. You didn't even have to have a job, and they were giving you. I'm glad you brought up that example. Listen to this, BC. No. With that same example. With that same example. Okay. Right now, the banks made billions of dollars, and they caused a near housing market crash. And who came in to save them was the government. At the time, it was President Obama. Right? So, what caused the banks to get away to do this and to get away with it? It was because of the lobbying of the American governmental officials that allow them to do these things. So whenever you have private enterprise infiltrating the government, it is no longer the government per se, but more an extension of corporations.
Here's the thing.
And the end result of all of that was profit.
Right. Here's the thing. People think that human greed means capitalism. That's not it. Human greed exists in every system. And what you're saying is your real worry is when the government's influence gets in on profiteering. And the solution that people give for that as adverse to capitalism is to give the government control over everything? No. I agree with you. I agree totally. The government should not attempt to influence the free market. I agree. What that means is we want less government influence. We want more private enterprise. The problem in all of these situations you showed wasn't the private company. The private ownership of the means of production didn't create the crash. The private ownership of the means of production didn't create the super profit for the billionaires in the pandemic. It was the government influence. In the 2008 crash, to show you how much of that was government influence, both sides was government influence. The government, yes, they bailed out the bankers. After the bankers did the nonsense, the government bailed out the bankers, and then the bankers used the bailout money instead of spending the money to get people who lost their life savings. Instead of spending the money to give them back the money, the bankers gave themselves billion-dollar bonuses. That's the government for you. And on the previous side of that, you were saying that the banks were giving out bogus loans. Do you know why the banks were giving out those bogus loans? Well, the government changed some rules to force the bank to have some equity and diversity. You see, some banks then used to give out loans to as much black people and people who didn't qualify because they didn't have enough credit. And the government decided that, you know, we can't have that. We can't have black people getting less loans. That doesn't look good. It looks racist. So they cleared some laws and shifted things around to allow the banks to give loans to who they see fit. And then the banks did just that. And you see the trickle-down effect. So the start of the crisis and then the bailout of the crisis is both government influence. And you think the problem there is the private ownership of the means of production? And then the solution there is what?
The problem was with the banks, with JP Morgan and Bank of America. It wasn't the government. The government only came in when the banks found themselves in trouble.
You weren't listening to me, BCE. You weren't listening. You have to listen to what I'm saying. The banks did not lend subprime loans because it was against the law. The government, in seeking to create more diversity and equity in lending, allowed the banks to lend those subprime loans. The government created the avenue for the bad loans. So the government was on that side too.
That is the public narrative. But it is the banks who approach the government for the government to tell them, to give them the green light to do that. Because that doesn't make sense, bro. That doesn't make sense. That has to do with the banks lobbying the government officials.
Bless up, Shay. Right? BC, it's irrelevant who approached who and who asked who and who and who and who and who. The reality is, the permission to do this started with the government. If the government didn't get involved in private enterprise, then this wouldn't have been a problem. So the problem here isn't the private enterprise. The problem is the government. If the government didn't have the power to get into the private enterprise and put their thumbs on the scale, then there would be no subprime loans. You see, what subprime loans are bad loans that the banks very likely would not be able to collect back the money on. Banks will not lend a loan back. The only reason they do that is because of government backing. You could say that the bankers lobbied and but the bankers and the government is the same thing, because when the government when the secretary retires from the government, he goes and works in the bank. So to try and make it one of the other, it's the same thing. The problem isn't the private enterprise, the problem is on the government end. The government is creating that.
Like literally, bro, like when Silicon Bank was crashing, right? And they look towards Big Daddy government. If the government say, you know, raise up the little glasses and say, wait, you're crashing? Well, crash now.
That's what you're supposed to do.
That's what it's supposed to be. That's free market. If your business crash and fail, and the government say, well, crash and fail. We don't care. We not getting involved. That's basically free market. If the government literally say that you too big to fail, we would literally bail you out. Come on, man.
You see,
the government actually, it makes no sense to me that people really believe that just because private entities and the government are in cohesion, which is cronyism, would believe that somehow that is capitalism and its core, the profiteering of governments. That no, come on, let's be real here. That's not what it is. That's not free market.
And the reality is, my take on this is, I believe people are greedy. I believe if you have private ownership of the means of production, some people are going to attempt to monopolize some goods and get greedy with it. I don't deny that. My thing is, what is the alternative? Because the alternative of private ownership is public ownership. Public ownership is politician ownership. We have seen what that looks like the world over. They tried it many times before. And when a politician controls resources that are not their own, look at it in Trinidad and Tobago. Look how they spend the resources, because it's not theirs. If the company crashes, they don't lose money. They have no vested interest in this. I'm sorry, I would rather at least have the private owner who is interested in making maximum money. Yes, he is. He might be a greedy guy, but he wants to keep his company running. And the best way for him to keep his company running is by giving me a good resource. You look again, Ariel was saying Americans were getting angry. Good, because if you look at their student loan system, and Joe Biden keeps forgiving some billions and some billions, millions, and I believe that's nonsense. That's stealing money from the poor to give to the rich. But either way, the reason the student loans are in the problem they are in is, again, government got in. As soon as the government got in and assured these student loans would be paid back by government backing, surprise, surprise, the loans and the price of schooling just went. Government involvement. The problem here isn't the private.
You know, but this is the funny thing, Nathan, because when I saw Justin Trudeau talk about these big supermarkets need to, do their price reduction, or else they will be taxed to death, right? I'm like, okay, wait, and you all is the same government that bail out all these big monopoly businesses, all these big businesses, y'all bail them out when they was actually going to crash to the floor. Y'all literally lock people out of a lot of things, and now you want to tax companies to death. So okay, you tax them to death, they can't keep up with actually giving the goods to people. Now they move out of there, they close down the store, they lock. Now you can't buy a bread. On your minimum wage money, you can't even buy a bread. You know why? Because there's no Walmart there. There's no Chinese groceries there for you to go to. You understand what I'm saying? So no, government involvement in business is just cronyism. It's nothing short of communist behavior. You understand what I'm saying? Nobody should ever be mad about the fact that a businessman wants to make maximum profit. He wants to make maximum profit. You know why? Because he have a good to sell you. And if the good is good, you would buy it. Nobody buys bad goods. That's just ridiculous. You know what's funny is that when you only have one shop to go into, that's the place with the bad good. You know why? Because you use the only shop on the block.
Correct.
And if it's the only shop on the block, you don't need to make a good because you have all the consumers.
Correct.
And that's not good for business. Like, imagine the fact. Imagine if we only had JT to shop in and it was in Port of Spain, and now some people had to go to Port of Spain to JT. JT could sell you steel bread, you all would buy it. You want to eat. And you know what I'm going to say? Capitalism bad. That would make sense?
You know how you can picture that? Can you imagine if all the groceries in Trinidad were owned by the state and were staffed with public servants?
Wow.
Nathan,
Yeah, man.
it sounds to me as though you believe that the government is independent of the private sector. Is that an accurate thing for me to say?
I believe no. I said I said as much. I said that the government is the bank, especially in the US, because people who work in the FDA, people who work in the secretary in one of the cabinet offices of the president, they go over and then they are executives in pharmaceutical companies, executives in military companies, executives in banks. So no, they are one and the same. They're people. I don't think they are separate from private companies. What I do think is that the government influence should, as much as we can make it happen, be separated from private enterprise. The government influence should be separate from private enterprise.
But who do you think has a greater impact, the private sector on the government or vice versa? Who do you think is control of who? And the reason why I'm asking you this question, I would like to hear your answer, and I'll tell you why I asked you that question.
I think that's a chicken or the egg kind of question. Because it's like a symbiotic relationship where one has influence over the other, which has influence over the other. So something that the government does would influence the private sector and change the private sector's behavior, and the change in the private sector's behavior could then reciprocally change the government also. So I don't think necessarily that one is totally in control over the other. I don't think that's true. I think that's the conspiratorial mind, and there's no actual proof for that. Obviously, there's influence, but to say that one is controlling the other totally, I don't think so. There's lots of mutual influence.
All right. Well, it is not conspiracy, but the reality is the private sector has greater influence on the government than the government on the private sector. For example, now let's go back to what you just said. Whenever the government has greater influence in the private sector, it has to do with mom and pops businesses, right? Where the government will dictate to them how they should operate. But look at this, look at our economy, for example. We have a group of people we love to call the 1%.
Uber came to Trinidad. What happened to Uber when they came to Trinidad?
Well, they closed down.
Why?
Right? Well, I wasn't following Uber because I was never interested in that.
Government. And Uber is one of the biggest companies in the world. Is Hard Rock? What was the Rock Hard Cement, massive private company, came to Trinidad, closed down. Why?
Because government run them out for private enterprise interests.
And that's exactly the point I was making. So yes, TCL may have had some influence on the government's decision. But listen, you could have court closed. BCE, you say it in affirmative, brother, and let them quote your name as saying it in affirmative. Allow me to say me. TCL may have had some influence over the government's decision. But the government ran out a whole company. So yes, private enterprise may have influence on the government, but the government also has great influence on private enterprise. That's literally what I'm talking about. It's not one or the other.
You see, the thing is, I was alluding to the 1% in this country, right? Now, you will see that it has certain companies in this country that seem to be unaffected by the normal cycles of business. For example, a lot of businesses in this country starving for forex, but yet you're seeing multi-million-dollar companies have no problems in obtaining forex. Forex comes from the bank. The bank from central bank. Central bank is controlled by the government. Right? Now, you have certain companies getting extremely lucrative contracts year after
So
year.
with that example you saying there BC. With that example you saying there BC. The government controls the flow of forex in Trinidad and Tobago. That's true. I don't want that. Again, to establish the point I constantly say, I want the government outside as much as possible of controlling these things. I want the government float the currency, have nothing to do with the forex, allow people to buy and trade as they see fit. But the government in Trinidad is as it is. They have control over that. You're saying that it seems like they're allowing some companies to get it, and a lot of companies, private companies, some $1 million companies, it's not only small companies, some $1 million companies are struggling to get forex. So is the government influencing those private companies that are struggling to get forex? Is that the government influencing them? Huh?
What I'm saying to you, the government of the day is not installed by themselves. The government of the day is installed by private interest groups.
No, the government of the day is installed by voters.
Well, you could think that if you like, but you see.
No, I don't think that. That's a fact.
You see,
it is a fact.
You see the candidates who go up to be elected. The candidates who go up are not selected by the voters.
True.
They're selected by the interest groups. So what we doing by voting is validating who they want in power.
Yeah, to some extent, some of it, but you're not making. I'm not getting the crux of your point here. Are you saying that there's corruption in governance? If that's what you're saying, you're not getting an opposing voice here. If what you're saying though is that private enterprise is a problem because they influence government, I don't understand what's the. So are you saying that we should get rid of private enterprise because they influence? What's the point of it?
What? No, notice I said 1%. Private enterprise, as you just said, is a very broad term. It includes everybody from the doublesman straight up
Correct.
to the multi-billion-dollar company, right? I was specific when I said the 1%. The 1% refers to the multi-millionaires and the billionaires. That is an exclusive group of financial people there. Right? So what I am saying to you is that the real government is not the government that we see. The real government are private 1% interest groups who control the economy, and they say who gets in, who stays out, and who makes a profit, and who businesses will fail.
Well, I think you're a bit too gung-ho on the fact of that, as in, yes, some of that is true, and it has always been self-evidently true. The big fish in the pond obviously makes the biggest splash. The cockroach in the fowl party had a miney business in the corner. That's known. We live in a unipolar world. We had to ask the United States permission to go trade with Venezuela, our neighbors. So yes, I agree. The people with the most power and money have more influence. That is true. They do not have all the ultimate influence to. Do not let anything fool you into believing that. You could go and open a business tomorrow. You could go and import goods. It could be a bit more difficult. It is difficult. And I think the PNM government is a bit obstructive in business. I agree. But they don't control everything. That's not true at the same time.
You see, I think you're misunderstanding me. I am not, they do control everything, right? But it doesn't mean to say that me being a small or micro businessman wouldn't get a few greener corn, right?
But if they control everything, why would they give you a few grain of corn?
Because at the end of the day, they still need us. Because what we represent to them are consumers, right? So at the end of the day, you just give us enough to keep us alive kind of scenario, right? Because at the end of the day, as much as KFC have I won't say monopoly, but they are number one in the chicken and chips business, right? They have to give us sufficient employment so that we could go and buy KFC. Because at the end of the day, right, they need us to be consumers. So that is why they will allow us to have a small business here and there. But anytime your small business growing exponentially and they taking notice of that, they coming after you to mash it down.
So you're saying, so BCE, do you believe that in Trinidad, you cannot open a business and grow it to a large size?
I believe you can, but when the business reach a size of, let me be specific, let me say you're making $200,000 in profit a month, not total, I'm talking about profit alone. So if you're making $200,000 profit, it means to say your total sales could be something like $450,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you reach a certain profit financial threshold, you become recognized and you end up on the radar of these people.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
What happens depends on how much it is.
Depends on what?
You know, it's me.
I can give you an example.
Go ahead, give me the example. I'm listening. I'm very intrigued.
Hello?
Yeah. I'm listening. Very intrigued.
Internet. I think it's internet.
No, my internet, I don't know if your internet's sticking or my internet's sticking there. It had an incident a few years ago where in the beverage space, a certain company wanted to import certain things. When they import their items and whatnot, customs refer them to, I believe, Trinidad Manufacturing Association for clarification on what this company was importing, right? And the company said to customs, you have no right to refer our matter to them because they are not a governing body of anything. They are basically a group made up of private interest people. The company took customs to court and they win the matter, right? That resulted in the particular product that this company was making to be blackballed in certain 1% businesses.
Bruh, I know. Wait. I could stop you there because I know TTMA. I work with TTMA. I know the CEO personally. I have an interview on my YouTube channel with the CEO of TTMA. I know people in TTMA. I go to their convention every year, their trade and investment convention. I go to their trade and investment convention every year. I I know the people there, and there are loads of small and micro manufacturers inside of the TTMA. And I could tell you very likely, if you insult the Manufacturers Association, which is the conglomerate association that has the most manufacturers in the region together, if you insult them, you could be shocked that you're blackballed after that. That's how business works. That's how business works. That's why for me, when I'm doing something, I go and I call the TTMA and I try to get on their good graces. That's why networking is important. You see, the problem that some small businesses have, the problem that some small men have, is they think the world owes them something. They feel if I have a good business idea, the world is supposed to open like an oyster before me and I'm just supposed to walk through. That does not happen. It's a competitive world out there. If you are creating a product that is going to disrupt the market for someone else, you think they're going to just freely allow you? No, you have to fight for your position. But to say that it's impossible for a small company to get into, I know personally that's not true. I know many entrepreneurs that started within the last 10 to 12 years and they entered, and some of them are making good bank. So it's not as closed off as you might think. That's why I said it's conspiratorial minded. It's thinking like everyone is against you and there's a whole plot, when it's really people seeking their own private interests. People are selfish, people are greedy, but they don't have as much ultimate control as you might think.
Nathan, who insulted who?
I'm going on what you said. You said that customs referred them to TTMA for some advice, and they gave TTMA the cold shoulder and went to court, not so?
No, they didn't take TTMA to court, no. They take customs.
I know, but they gave TTMA the cold shoulder, saying they can't tell us anything, and then they took customs to court, not so?
Yeah, that is correct.
Right. So wait, in the business world, that is an insult. That is a slight. You got recommended to come to me as the overseeing association in the country to get some advice on how to do something. Instead of taking the advice, you took it to court. You won the matter, and then you're surprised that me, the association with most manufacturers, want nothing to do with you anymore? Like what? That's no surprise. There are ice cream makers, the people making curry ice cream and all these kind of little weird stuff. They are in TTMA, in the Trade and Investment Convention. They're traveling up and down the islands with the Labour Minister. They aren't all that well connected.
The company that took customs to court is a very big company, eh? It is not a small company.
So they're 1%.
Right? Yes, close. Yeah, you can see that if you wish. Yeah.
Well, then that is 1% fighting 1%. How that is any of we business? Listen, the 1% fights the 1% very, very drastically, you know.
I agree, sir. But I think you're missing my point. What the point the judge made was the point that the company was saying all the time, that you're correct in saying that TTMA is distinguished and is an umbrella for businesses, right? Mm-hmm. But what they are saying is that by customs telling them they have to go through TTMA is an overreach of the powers or the influence of the TTMA.
Well, according to the court, it might be an overreach of the powers of customs. But I understand what you're saying. And I agree. I could see why the court would rule in that way. But I am saying, I understand how generally the business world works. I don't know the specifics of that situation, so I cannot prescribe everything on that situation. But from the information you gave there, it sounds like there was some kind of slight. And if, as you say, this is a large company, that large company, that means they already were not a member of TTME. If they're a large company and they're not a member of TTME, very likely that's not a mistake. So there may be bad blood. I don't know. But in business, those things happen.
I think so.
In business, those things happen. It happens, and you didn't shake the right hand. You didn't donate to the right candidate. Those things right now. Elon Musk, he took over Twitter, the richest man in the world, bought Twitter, and he's starting to move a bit against the government establishment in the United States. All of a sudden, they're investigating him for nearly everything. Taxes, his employment practices. I believe right now the Department of Justice is trying to sue him because he didn't hire enough illegal immigrants. He was only hiring American citizens, and they're suing him for discrimination because an American man with an American company only hired American citizens. So, yeah, I mean, and he's the richest man. So those things happen. There's fighting. The business is a cutthroat world. I don't deny that.
You see, this is what really, this is what I think this is what we really getting around to. This is just plain and fact. This is cronyism. That's it. This is it, right? Hey, listen, if Uber can even come here and compete in the market because the government run them out, that's cronyism. If the government maintains the status quo for one company to have all the rain and power, that's cronyism. That's it. And nobody should be vexed that we the people want a free market to let people open up their businesses and thrive if they could. Because at the end of the day, this is the thing, right? Y'all could say y'all want public ownership of productivity, which is madness to me because no country has ever really succeeded with that nonsense talk, and people need to stop quote China. China doesn't run the economy as a communist one. Very capitalistic over there. The government is just communist. The thing for me is people need to stop think that capitalism is this monopoly, only the rich keep getting richer thing. No. Because at the end of the day is this. If you all don't like the 1%, you could instantly make the 1% non-existent here. Just don't buy the shit. Don't buy nothing. Don't buy anything. Don't even give them a consumer nothing. You could shut down the businesses tomorrow. If most of the country don't want to buy a good, you could do that. That's the unethical practices. But you see, you also want the government to do the work for all of the legwork. That the government don't care about your legwork. The government care about their power. You understand what I'm saying? The government care about their candidates that they need for you all to vote for, so they can keep steamrolling you all out there into their cronyism. And that doesn't make any sense. You understand what I'm saying? That's why people couldn't march around America talking about striking for $25 minimum wage because apparently the cost of living is supposed to stay at $50 a good. You know what I'm saying? That's not how it does work. The government doesn't go and watch all it and take all the $25 an hour and say, well, you know, let's give you all our livable wage. That's not how it works. That's why the government keeps bringing illegal immigrants. You know what's funny? Is that, and the same thing happening in Trinidad, by the way, don't believe that the Trinidad government is not stooping too low to bring illegal immigrants to railroad your labor market in this country. They will definitely do that too. So it's funny here that you would depend on your government to do the legwork when they will bring in illegal immigrants who work for less than this $20-50 an hour and destroy your labor market and labor value. You know, that's why you all have a new Miss Grand who is a Venezuelan.
You know, Hotep, the point you making there with the Venezuelan piece, I didn't even put that into the statement I'm making there on the minimum wage. With the increase in illegal workers coming out from Venezuela to at the same time increase the minimum wage really doesn't make sense, you know. You are undercutting the market there for sure. That's going to undercut the market. And you're 100% right in saying that you have the buying power. That a lot of that's why I was saying to BCE, I understand 1% has they have power. If you get more money, BC, that's life. Money is opportunity. Money gives you opportunity. You get more money, you are going to get more opportunity to have more power. That's just reality. There isn't anything really anybody could do about that. That is the reality. That's what it is. But to make it to make yourself think like you don't have the ability to do anything beside what they allow you to do is not true. They do not actually have that much power. And always bear in mind, humans aren't that good at planning. That's one of the ways to throw out conspiracies. They are not 500 people scattered around the world that can concoct a super secret plan and all of them keep it perfectly hidden and work it together in perfect unison. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen like that. Western for years and it still is get duck and things sometimes. People don't have that kind of amazing skill that you think they have sometimes. Ronnie, I know you're waiting a long time to talk to you.
Yes. And you know, I just forget.
I tell you right.
But I remember. I try to remember. So my thing was back when BCE was talking about, you know, the 1%ers companies, and if you have your small business and you're coming up and you're kind of, are you hearing me all the time or?
Yeah. Clear, real clear.
Oh. Basically, if you start coming up and you know you get on the radar or whatever, a few things to note. I personally, I do have the vendetta against the 1%. I think that, I mean, some of it may not be so legally gained, and you know, but one, they provide opportunity for other people. So I'll take that with it. They provide a service that we use. It's not like they reach 1% status. I'm not saying that they reach the working hard and you know them kind of thing. I'm not saying that. But at the end of the day, they provide a service or a product that we use. Right? So it's not that we're getting nothing from them. You know, there is an exchange. And if you don't like the exchange, as Trini Hotel said, just don't use it. Go and look for a small person who providing the same service or providing the same product and support them. That is the only way you could really move or shift power into probably other people's pocket. But you're not going to get the majority of the country behind that. And even if you do get a lot of people behind that, a lot of small businesses, as you were saying just now, Nathan, not very good at planning, right? So I might have my small business, I might be able to service 10 or 20 people. And people might say, you know what, I want to support this business because I am into supporting small businesses. And then I get an influx of 100 people. Then I know in a real bad position. So apart from you want to support, we also want to encourage people to grow their business and whatnot in a healthy and stable manner. It wouldn't just be a big grand shift, you know, because that annual could destroy your business. If I preparing for 10 and I get 100, that is 90 people who are very upset with me because they didn't get what they wanted, or they got a subpar product. So it's not all well and good to just say, you know, like I go in my, you could go fair enough, but please keep in mind these other things that happen, and like just stop making the 1%. Like to me, the 1% is this big, is a big nothingness that we pick at when we don't have nothing to talk about. So we back to the 1% when we have real problems that we could concern ourselves with. Because the 1% is really actually not a problem for us to even concern ourselves with. You don't like them, don't buy from them. Don't use their products, go on to something else. But this kind of emphasis that we put on it, like these people living in our mind rent-free, ridiculous, like it's absolutely unnecessary.
I agree.
Because you have the power, really and truly.
I agree. Now, just now, let it be noted, my battery is probably on a 6% somewhere, so we close in. We close in here. Go ahead, BC. Give your closing statement.
I think we tend to, downplay the 1% in the sense that it's nothing personal, always say if you don't like it, go and shop somewhere else. But the fact of the matter, the 1% are the major manufacturers. So when it is because they have major manufacturing, because they have basically cornered the market in the industry, when you don't buy from them, who else you're going to buy from?
Which 1% cornered which market? Which 1% has which market cornered? In Trinidad.
All
Which give me, if it's
water, blue. You have blue waters. You have
You mean in the country where Wassa water is one of the cheapest in the world? You worried about the 1% corner in blue waters?
Nathan, the reason why Trinidadians have tanks in their yard is because somebody wanted tanks to sell, right? So all of a sudden, Wassa couldn't give water to the nation.
No, that is not true. Wassa could have never give water. Tanks, it's just people could afford tanks now. Wassa could have never give water. But, we're not shorting for drinking water. You could go and fill a barrel by a standpipe. Nobody is drinking blue waters out of necessity. Don't give me that.
It do have standpipes again for your information, eh?
So you trying to tell me if wait. You trying to tell me if you don't drink blue waters, you have no water to drink?
What I'm trying to tell you is that we have a water shortage in this country from Wassa, right? Secondly, water, beverage industry is part of our daily living. When you shut off these industries, where you going to get it from?
Bro, you told me the 1% have a market cornered. The market you call is blue waters. One, blue waters does not have the water market cornered. One. Two, is water that you could get in the pipe. My baby is now 1 year old and she don't drink bottled water. She drinking good Wassa chlorinated water. In environmental side, we went and we did the test. The water from Wassa is usually just as good and sometimes better than the water you get from the bottled water. So give me another one. Give me another, not blue waters. Give me another market. Give me another market that the 1% has cornered that you cannot get.
Generally, the 1% has major manufacturing under their belts. The question I'm asking, if it is, we take the advice of what Rooney and Hotep say that if you don't like it, go somewhere else. Where else you're finding in mass quantities what they are producing? That's
what I'm asking. Now, Sylvan, you are making that point there, vehicles, I would agree. Especially new vehicles. But still, and PNM, Ali Party PNM, they specialized in killing that. But there were individual people. I remember the Single Fathers Association guy. I think he was bringing in vehicles at a point in time. There were individuals bringing in vehicles. It wasn't a cornered market, and it still isn't a totally cornered market. There are still small individuals that bring in used vehicles all around Trinidad. It's not one group. Now, if you're talking about the new car market, I agree the new car market is cornered by the 1%. But you could get vehicles somewhere else.
But the small man cannot satisfy the market. And whenever you have a situation where the market cannot be satisfied.
Oh my God.
What? Which market? The vehicle market?
But you don't want to satisfy the market though.
Right. When it is you have a problem with not being able to keep up with market demand, quality drops.
Here's my issue, BCE. BCE, here's my issue with what you're saying there, bro. You haven't given me any area that is actually cornered by the 1%. You have yet to give me an example by the 1% that you cannot get it anywhere else. Where's that area in Trinidad and Tobago cornered by the 1% that you cannot get it anywhere else?
No, well, I mean, Nathan, that's a simplistic question you're asking. Because the fact of the matter is that I bring up Blue Waters as an example where they mass produce bottled water, and and you telling me Wassa. The fact of the matter is that you're comparing an unreliable water supply, which is Wassa, to a consistent producer of bottled water.
Wait. BC, pause. No. We have to go the topics that you're talking. You consider going in the grocery, buying a bottle of Blue Waters, a case of bottles of Blue Waters, bringing it home to drink to be more reliable than taking a container, a big jug, and there are some standpipes, but you say there are none by you. Okay, you have no running water. Going to any nearest area with running water and filling it to the hilt. You think it's easier to get the Blue Waters than Wassa water?
Is not what I think. It is based on sales of Blue Water. The majority of consumers think that.
No. The majority of consumers do not think that. The majority of consumers drink Blue Waters because it's a fad. They drink Blue Waters because it's a fad. Trinidad had less distribution of water 30 years ago, and nobody drank bottled water in Trinidad 30 years ago. It's not about the distribution of water. BCE, you not see, and this is the problem, Trini Hotep. To go back to what Trini Hotep was saying, this is our problem. Why the 1%ers, as they call them, could reign over us like that, because we have in our mind that, I had to get bottled water, I can't survive without a bottled water. Like, are you serious? Are you serious? You are a slave to the system if you think like that. You deserve for the 1%ers to lead you by your nose like a cattle for your life if you think that you cannot survive without Blue Waters drinking water. And to touch on what you were saying, Ronnie, I think the talk about the 1%ers, a lot of it has envy in it. I agree. I don't like some of the disdain some people talk about it with, especially when I hear people like Kamala Prasad Bisasa talking about 1%ers when she is a 1%er herself. And people talk about the 1%ers with disdain, and a lot of it is envy. A lot of it is envy. A lot of people have the assumption in their mind, and it's a kind of Marxist assumption, that any person who is a 1%er or wealthy, they got it through wickedness and machinations and advantage. While some of that might be true, many of those people worked harder than you. That's just the reality. You go look at their lives. You go look at the hours they worked. You go look at how young they started. Go look at the innovation they tried. Go look at the risks they took. And you sit there every day doing nothing, begging a union to get you some more pay for doing the nothing, and vex because people who risk it and actually work it have it. Nah. That's not how it works to me.
I think that's
this is the thing.
It's a complete romanticizing of the 1% in it.
No, that's not a romantic, because to me,
read the statistics, BCE, before you sound like you're heavily tainted on some Marxism, but before you believe that, go read the statistics. Read how many of the 1%, how many of them inherited it, and how many of them made it on their own, and read how they did it.
This is Cuba's love child. This is Cuba's love child, guys. Cuba would have accepted with open arms, you know what I'm saying? Especially 1980s Cuba at that.
You're absolutely wrong.
Bro, Cuba is a socialist country. Cuba is a socialist country. Cuba right now is a socialist country. It is.
I don't have a socialist thinking at all. You're absolutely wrong. And you're speaking on the behalf.
Yeah. Sylvan, I hope BCE come back every time.
Yeah, the thing is this. I regularly say that a lot of us have a very American, Western standards of living. We want to talk about, oh God, look, Amazon opening up groceries and they have a monopoly on everything. Well, okay, and you want to consume, you want to be a Western consumer, right? And let them have all the power, and now you're mad that, oh God, they have all the power. Well, you make them have all the power. You see, when you think that they, do this populous activities to become powerful, no, you make them powerful. You see, when we had monarchies, a man didn't stand up and say, well, I'm about to subjugate the people and become king. No. The people say, he will be our king. And then his lineage will take over from him. And so forth, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. That's how it works. You all give people power. The same way how you give politicians power over you. The same way how the Chinese people give Mao power. And now his party reigns supreme. The same way how you all give PNM and UNC power. And now they reign supreme. The people who claim that you all take advantage by the upper class and the 1%, you all keep giving them power every day, every single day. And then when we tell you later, well, pull back on your power, stop giving them power here. So what we go do, we cannot meet and give them power because they quality market. What? Be serious and be for real. Quality market on what?
Yeah,
No. That's not how it works. You see, if you would support things that actually take away power from the government, then it will make more sense that way. But you see, you all don't want to do that because you want to drink blue waters and fat and wear iPhone and buy $8,000 iPhone and want to do all that kind of American shit down here and call about 200 a date and things like that. And that don't make sense for me. But you want to live like that? Yeah, what I meant.
All right. Hey, people, this going real good.
I didn't get to end myself.
Well, Ronnie will get to end. Ronnie again to end here. BC, I know. BC, I know. We'll be back.
Come back.
We here. We'll be back.
Now, Hotep say something there, man, I had to get reply to.
Go ahead, let BC go ahead, and then Ronnie, you close off.
Listen, Hotep and Mr. Nathan romanticizing the 1% because what we forgetting is that our economy is influenced by the drug economy.
True.
Right? I believe I read somewhere that 20% of our GDP is from drugs. Now, when it is you have drug money in an economy, it distorts the economy. For example, it carries up the prices of goods that is not really valued at the price. For example, in the 80s, a lot of land was $150,000. Today, that same lot of land is $400,000 because the drug man went with $200,000, $300,000 to buy the land to launder his money, right?
So is the drug man buy up the land in the back by me?
Well, me no, partner, me going there. I talking to me, right? Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that when you have a distortion of the economy because of money laundering, it comes from a certain sector of people in the society. It don't come from the man on the street. So when it is you want to say they work so hard and they take risk, they take superficial risk as far as I am concerned. Because
but you can't paint all the 1% with a money laundering drugs brush. Can you?
No, I didn't. But what I'm trying to say is that you didn't take into account the distortion of the economy through money laundering. And that affects the small man like me who want to do honest business.
Yeah. I agree. I don't disagree with that. And I agree there's a lot of drugs, Trinidad. We know that. We know that a big ship somewhere off the East Coast recently. We know there's that. I don't disagree. I am sure there are some wealthy people. There may be some 1% people in Trinidad where their finances come from the dealings and dabblings. I don't doubt that. But that doesn't, to me, negate what I'm saying. Because there are poor people who dabble in drugs and they're just not good at it too. It's not the dabbling in drugs isn't a matter of wealth level. That's a matter of morality. I am not talking about the dabbling. I'm talking about the reality where there are many. And I'm not saying this out of guess. I know people who may be considered in the 1%. I know some of them. And nearly any person I know who is generally in the upper million kind of level they work harder than the average person. Sometimes some of the I deal kind of way in at both levels. When you talk to the guys on the corner, and some of them have a lot of envy against the guys up there. But when you watch the amount of free time some of those guys on the corner have, they couldn't even imagine living the kind of busy life that some of those people live. They can't even imagine it. So yes, I don't disagree. Some of them may have had it, added in extra. I don't disagree with that. But there are many people who are at that level and they did indeed work hard. I'm not saying that it's all hard work, because there are some people who worked hard and they didn't get anything like that in life. There are some people who worked really hard and they're still mixing concrete 30 years later. I'm not saying that it's only hard work and they're only there because they were the hardest workers in society. Some of it may be fortune, some of it is intelligence, some of it is understanding social cues, some of it is understanding the market. There are all kinds of different factors. But I do say that there is a factor that is hard work, and sometimes in the envy of 1%ers we throw it at. Yeah, Ronnie, take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. It was lovely. Come back for Thursday. What I was ending off with is DC had made a comment about when he something about supply in the market or something like that. And I think it's important, especially if you don't have the capital like that. As a small person, it's not about cornering the market or being able to supply the market. I think you corner what you have. You take a little square and you make that square your corner and you build on that. And you just continuously build and grow, and eventually you reach up there. And if you, or if I as a business person, I start out small and I work hard and I reach up in 1% level, would I now be demonized?
Yes.
You have to think about these things, because this weekend, right, I spent the weekend with some friends of mine. And one of them is a young guy who is now starting his business, and one of them is an older guy, and he is very well established, 1%, right? Definitely. Like, he's the 0.01%. And the younger guy was like, "Way boy, I didn't know you used to work so hard. Like, you literally coming in midnight and getting up like 4 or 5 in the morning to get your work done, and like nobody don't know. Everybody see you having fun, they went online or whatever. I didn't know it's so hard you just work." But because people don't know, they don't see when you put in them hours, and they just assume like, yeah, that daddy money or that mommy money or whatever. You understand? You working hard. So sometimes, we look in and we make certain observations and we make certain comments about people as I understand the whole drug thing, and it's a little bit of it is what you willing to do, because me, I'm not willing to ship no drugs into this country. I'm real sorry. I ain't willing to do none of that. I'm not willing to sell my body. I'm not willing to work no corner. I'm not willing to do none of those things. So I had to work hard. You understand? So let me come back Thursday for the rest of the talk. Go on an account and click on the Discord. Join the Discord, have a little conversation. Come back Thursday talk.
Yeah, Hotep, what going on? I hear you grumbling there.
Yeah, be mindful.
Not mindless.
That's really the quote.
Yes. And here now, Ronnie, if you reach up there and you make it, I see Sylvan say click. I bet you make your own click. And you hire in your family?
Of course.
But
I mean, not that I have any, but come on, I'll make.
I support nepotism in business.
100. I support nepotism in private. Let me make it clear. In private business, I 100% support nepotism. You feel you could tell me not to hire my child in my business? All right, people, it was nice. I hope you educated, informed, or entertained. I am Nathan Springer. This was the Mindful Live Show. I should be back tomorrow evening around 9 p.m. If I am not, I will let you know in the Discord server. These days are a little busy. But nonetheless, we are wrong. We do this every weeknight, generally around 9 p.m. If you like it, make sure to follow me or subscribe to me rather over on YouTube, Nathan Springer over on YouTube. You could catch the lives that you missed. This is what we do. Thank you for being here. It was enjoyable. BC, don't feel no type of way. This is what we do, bro. A man was in here at times saying that we should import 750,000 Venezuelans to bolster our labor market. So you haven't said even close to the most controversial thing yet, bro. So we'll see you again. Hold it on, people. Laters.
Thanks, man.
Not a problem. Peace. I'm out.